check if this thing's working. Hi there, everyone. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for welcoming Africa to RIPE. I mean, this is quite a big event for us. We've not normally participated in any of this, so this is quite a new thing for us. So today I'm pretty much going to take you through pretty much a very broad level overview of Africa, where we're at the moment, and hopefully demystify any sort of rumors of us running around in loincloths with lions. Okay, so from an Africa perspective, if you currently see in the top corner there, I've actually highlighted 4 of the top hubs within Africa. So from a business case point of view, those are definitely those areas you need to start concentrating on, any of you guys keen to coming into Africa. You'll see this map over here. It's quite a famous one that we use locally within Africa, and pretty much it represents the geographical size of Africa, which obviously shows a lot of our issues that we've faced over many, many years, besides the political ones. So pretty much population at the moment, I'm going to read some interesting stats to you guys. At the moment, we've got over 1 billion people, which is about 15.6% of the world's population. And of that, only 7% are actually internet users. So you'll see there's quite a low amount of internet users. Penetration on the internet side is at about 13% and rising. And another interesting fact is Africa is the second largest mobile market globally after Asia. So you'll see quite a bit in terms of our GDP growth and the way we're going from a GDP perspective. So as much as there's a lot of fear around Africa and where we're going, there's actually a hell of a lot of business opportunities that we're starting to see. And that's probably because we're starting on pretty much on a base of 0 and starting to grow quite quickly. So infrastructure projects is a big focus for us at the moment. Financial services and a lot of international financial companies coming into the physical environment, as well as the local guys starting to expand throughout the continent, such as a Standard Bank, a First National Bank, etc. Government spend, so there's been a lot of increase in terms of government spend, and some of the projects you guys might be aware of is one of the SKA project, where we're putting down satellite hubs, etc. throughout Africa. So this is also quite an interesting map from an Africa point of view. We kind of use this one all the time. And if you have a look there at the one, sort of, what is that? The smallest line on that map, which is actually SAT3. So interestingly enough, for the last besides the last 2 years, we've pretty much been running off less than a terabit worth of capacity coming into the continent itself. So, I mean, you guys can imagine that I just heard now that this conference itself is running off a gig worth of capacity, which is kind of an unheard of thing, and we haven't really had that kind of pleasure in terms of capacity until recently. So now, from a capacity point of view, we've currently grown that we're able to connect to 4 continents globally. SA itself is the 15th largest telecoms market in the world, as well as we've currently got over 25.8 terabits of submarine cable coming into the physical continent, growing to once the BRICS cable lands, growing to at least about 60 terabits of capacity coming into the physical continent. So, and on top of that, we've seen a huge price reduction in international capacity from about a year ago, where we were sitting at about $100 a meg, to now under $30 a meg. So this has actually created quite an exciting opportunity for us, as well as quite a challenge for us. As I listened to some of the previous speakers, where you guys are going on about IPv6 and scalability and et cetera, we're still trying to figure out IPv4. So that obviously from an educational point of view proves to be quite an interesting challenge that we also need to overcome. So quite an interesting side, and this is pretty much from a South Africa point of view. We've had a major amount of changes that have actually happened, and as you'll see, the time period has been really, really quick. And the biggest change is that 2008 LTIC ruling, where basically we had a monopoly of a telecom, which basically was the only operator that you could buy services from. And as of 2008, LTIC went to our government and said, hang on, we need a court ruling, where now there needs to be multiple networks who can provide services. So now we've got over 300 networks actually building out and rolling out fiber networks throughout our country and our continent from an Africa point of view. Another major change that's actually happened is you'll see the wax and easy. So I emphasize quite a bit around the actual landing stations and how much capacity is actually coming into the continent now, which obviously shows a huge amount of opportunity for us. So from a South Africa point of view, is essentially we have been pretty much benchmarked together with our brothers in Kenya, Egypt, and Nigeria to be one of the key pinnacle points from an economical growth side of things. So I'm going to read you some stats here, which is actually also quite interesting, is 2013 outlook. So looking ahead to 2013 report revealed that 71% of local businesses expect an increase in revenues in their business over the next 12 months, and forecast growth for 2013 to 2017 at 4.1%, compared to the previous year of 2.5% growth. So reason why I'm showing that is that obviously shows that we've got more businesses starting to come alive, we've got a lot more startups coming alive, and a huge amount of which represents, once again, on a GDP perspective. So key market growths for us from a South Africa point of view is tourism, and I'm sure a lot of you would want to go to Cape Town, so that's normally why that's the top of the list there. We've got great wine, more than welcome, and I did bring some bottles if anyone would like to share a glass. Mining and minerals, so our key guys around this side of things is people you would know like an Anglo-American, for example, and that's pretty much where South Africa kind of started, is with your gold and your diamond mining, and that still continues to grow. Despite what you might see on the news from an international perspective, it's still a massive growth portion for us. And a big portion for us is the ICT side of things. So that's why I'm here today, because previously this didn't seem to be such a growth side for us. So here's a little bit of an overview from an Africa ICT landscape. And so you'll see that 99% of the content consumed by users in Africa is imported. So this has been a huge debate from an African point of view, and it's been one of my own personal debates, is where essentially we're constantly going to the likes of the Googles, the Akamais, the Microsofts, which currently a lot of it, besides some of them, are actually hosted out of the country. Specifically, let's take Microsoft, for example, where we need to use that undersea capacity. And a lot of us are trying to sort of say, guys, please bring something into the country so that we can locally connect onto that to improve latencies and performance of any of those applications. But personal argument that I have with my African colleagues is that we should be producing content and distributing out to people like yourselves from an international perspective, where you guys can actually start utilizing African content and distributing that out. So you'll see that obviously mentions roundabout a lot around the trade and deficit or internet transit deficit that we mentioned. So there's that 13% and rising. An interesting one, which from a Facebook perspective, is at the moment we're doing, from an African side of things, we've got 51 million users at a 4.8% penetration rate. So we clearly love Facebook. And once again, largest mobile market. So key thing for any distribution or distribution models that you need to put into place is making sure that you can distribute across a mobile application when wanting to come into Africa. Terrestrial fibre, so this is another big myth that I'm hopefully going to solve today, is we do have a lot of terrestrial fibre already in place and growing. So you'll see a lot of the lower part of the continent is actually covered from a fibre perspective. And the interesting fact here is that over 3 million people are within a reach of an actual fibre node. So before, and I'd say before about 3 years ago pretty much, was majority of connectivity could only be accessed via a satellite backhaul kind of environment, which, as you guys very well know, is that you're sitting on a 600 millisecond latency issue, which therefore means certain applications wouldn't work. Now we actually do have fibre available, and it's continuously increasing to roll out. which also solves a lot of our cross-border issues, like you'll see between South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, etc. So this is probably the more exciting part. So from a peering point of view, we don't have a LINX or an AM6 kind of environment. We're very new off the starting block when it comes to peering. So you'll see we've actually only, throughout the entire continent, got 26 active internet exchanges, which does prove to be a challenge for us in terms of trying to obviously promote content coming into the country, etc. And there's a lot of learning that we need to do around our African exchange environments. I mean, even down to commercial models. How do you price it? How do you technically distribute things like IPv6, etc. So we've had to overcome a lot of those, and hence why only those 26 internet exchanges are actually live and active. From another big issue that we've got in Africa is that from a physical facility point of view, so you guys would have something like a Telehouse or an Equinix available. From a Africa side, the only really neutral data center that we have that serves the entire continent is Teraco, which I'm from, obviously. So there's a lot of growth around that, and as you can imagine, to build one of these facilities and for a Teraco to try and roll out to the rest of Africa, not just South Africa, it's a huge amount of capital investment. So that's another challenge that we obviously face, but slowly overcoming. Then I think the really exciting part about it, and you'll see the lady there doing the thumbs up, the free Facebook, is with peering now actually brings new product opportunities. And some interesting guys have actually rolled that out is Orange, who I think are here somewhere. They've actually rolled out that you can start getting free Facebook via the mobile environment, as well as obviously the browsing side of things. So there's some interesting products that have actually come out. Then the last block is also quite a political debate for us, is obviously reduced IP transit fees. So because your side from a European perspective is actually very mature, there is a lot of previous companies who earned a lot of revenue out of physical IP transit. And now with peering becoming a reality, there's a lot of changes that need to happen to various ISP business models. And that is actually happening quicker than we expect, which is once again fantastic for content owners coming into the country. So I've kept it really short and sweet because I'd like to actually give you guys a little bit of a chance to ask me questions, specifically around Africa and any ideas. I've stayed away from the technical side of things as well, rather focused on the commercial so that you guys can have a little bit of an opportunity. Cool. Any questions?
Hi, I'm Vesna Manojlović from RIPE66, community builder for RIPE Atlas, among other measurements tools. I'm not really asking a question, but suggesting operation of a sort. It would be good from our point of view if you would deploy throughout Africa to actually measure over the years this growth that you are expecting. So I'm inviting you to find me later and to talk about
Absolutely. It. Absolutely, that would be fantastic. And anyone else, I mean, from an Africa point of view, once again, we're going through a massive learning curve, and we have to try and really jump this kind of digital divide between the two continents. So anyone else who's got suggestions around that would be great. So thank you.
Randy Bush, IJ. Well, Vesna, instead of giving me 25 to bring to HAFNOG next month, give me 50. To see all that wet fiber around Africa is just stunning and wonderful, if you know the history.
Yes.
It was horrible.
Well, your history, you rolled out the first Diginet.
Yes, it's true, sadly enough. The terrestrial fiber, could you discuss regulatory issues crossing the borders, which is, I know in East Africa from Tanzania to Kenya, crossing that border, there's fiber going, and they're looking at each other, etc. So that's worth discussing because that's a little different than we're used to in the States or Japan or here in Europe.
Absolutely. So from a terrestrial fibre perspective, there's multiple issues. So there's the physical, which you see we kind of getting over in terms of actually trenching and rolling out the fibre, but we do have a hell of a lot of issues in terms of from each government's actually starting to work together. Like as a crazy example is if you go to the Mozambique border, so you'll be sitting on the South African side and you get great internet, and literally you cross less than a kilometre and suddenly you've got no internet. And you can see these two physical nodes sitting next to each other. And that is something that Africa as a whole needs to actually overcome. We are starting to see it happen between the SADC regions. So from a South Africa to, let's say, a Zimbabwe, etc. So those kind of collaborative measures are actually starting to happen. But up north, it is still a huge challenge, and generally, satellite is still being used from a north perspective. Does that kind of... It's a long debate. We could speak about that for hours.
Hi, Alex Orion. You mentioned about lack of local resources in the Africa, so just small remark. I think it should be operators' initiative to deploy some caches like Google Cache, Akamai CDN, or Root DNSs, which doesn't need a lot of resources. It is I've been deploying some of these things, and it is very, very easy. You don't need some strong resources, and yeah, just mostly only wish is needed for this.
And I do agree. Luckily, from our side, we have had a huge amount of support from Google, as well as from Akamai, who I saw CK here earlier. What we do need, though, is we do need other content as well. So other content, meanings, let's say, for instance, and I know a lot of you might not like this, but Microsoft. So Microsoft, for example, has launched a huge 365 initiative into Africa. And the biggest issue we've got around that is, let's say, for instance, a CCOM cable goes down, suddenly all the businesses utilizing a 365 will be down. So there is those challenges, and I mean, local DNSs, etc., we do need to start bringing more of that content into the country. And I'm hoping by us having more undersea cable availability and more terrestrial availability, as well as facilities like a Teraco starting to be available, that it provides a low-risk entry point for large content providers to be able to invest within the country.
Hello, Fergal Cunningham from the RIPE NCC. I have a question on chat from David from IP6Net Limited. Do you suffer with security issues on infrastructure, cabling, etc.?
Physical security, or? So in terms of security issues, I'll remark probably more on the physical side of things. So from a copper theft perspective, we've had huge issues around copper theft because the guys actually literally dig up the copper and actually start making all these fancy baskets that you guys buy over here. So, so next time you buy a basket, just remember you're probably cutting off a business somewhere. So that is an issue that we have faced. Interestingly enough, we have faced the same kinds of difficulty, not to such an extent on fibre, because it's the guys kind of dig down, take the fibre, and then they realize, hang on, I can't do anything with this, but then the fiber's already broken. And then the last issue that we actually face is probably a competitive one, and it's actually quite a crazy thing that happens around fiber. Specifically, I'll use Kenya as a great example, and one of the operators were complaining about this in Kenya, is the guys essentially will go in, they'll lay the fiber and do, normal fiber to the home and sell their services. And then in the evening, their competitor will come in, physically dig up that fiber, so they sabotage the fiber, cover it up, and then lay their fiber next to it, and then onward sell their services. So you kind of have that kind of competitive nature happening in certain areas within Africa. I think from a South Africa side of things, it's stabled a lot more. I think it's just generally where the continent or where the country is sitting at versus, let's say, for instance, a Kenya, etc.
Sandy Murphy, Sparta. I was interested if you could talk about the sorts of arrangements at the different exchange points. You talked about 26 different ones. Is it a place where people go to do bilateral peering agreements? Do you multilateral? Is it open peering? Route servers anywhere, anything like that?
So from that perspective, it depends on which country, once again, but I'll use what we've done actually and work quite closely with the LONAP guys, Andy, etc., to kind of educate us going forward. So we've launched in South Africa a NAP Africa, which is literally it's called NAP Africa, which is an open peering environment. And this is the first scene in Africa where we have multiple options, where you can do anything from multilateral peering to bilateral, depending on what your organization needs. And we do have root servers in place. There's a number of the other exchanges who not necessarily as mature in terms of that, who are still sitting with a bilateral kind of arrangement and no additional value adds. So we do, as exchanges, we've actually got an exchange forum called AFIX, and we actually collaborate together to actually start discussing what each exchange is doing and which one's doing right and wrong. But typically there's a lot of growth that needs to happen around the exchanges side of things.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
Hi, Warren Kamari, ex-South African.
Ex-South African?
Ex-South African.
Why are you ex? I feel like we're going through a breakup and I don't even know you.
So this was really interesting, but what can this community do to sort of help? What is the ask here?
Okay, so I think step one as an ask is from an educational point of view. I think that's always where everything starts. And what I'm doing here is to obviously ask for you guys to actually start monitoring Africa and seeing how you can add knowledge and just basic education around these environments. So we have a lot of initiatives happening with, let's take ISOC as an example, where a lot of the guys are going around and focusing on peering exchanges and getting new peering exchanges up and running in, the smallest of countries in Africa called the Gambia, as an example. So I think step one, education is key. Step two is from a content perspective, so making content available. And step three, which we're seeing already, is a lot of the global carriers coming to invest in Africa. And guys who have done it really, really well, as an example, is Orange, who literally have come in with their international knowledge and been able to pretty much take over from an Africa perspective to become one of the leading operators throughout the whole of Africa. So I think that there's three key things which will take a long time from your perspective and from ours. And from an Africa side of things is we're very open to actually start listening to your guys' ideas, which I think previously we were kind of closed-minded.
Is there not? That's the last question, please.
Cheers. Hi, Blake Willis. I'll say I have my Neotelecoms hat on today. You mentioned that you were the first multi-country carrier-neutral exchange or carrier-neutral colo provider in Africa. Why do you think that is? It's more of a regulatory thing, or an impediment to the business environment, or a combination of all of that, or?
It's a maturity. So you saw on my last block I said IP transit. So I mentioned that quite hectically. And basically, previously, a service provider would build a data center to put their own bandwidth, etc., within that environment, and then, oh, by the way, you can co-locate with me. And then they would charge transit fees. And unbelievable transit fees just to be able to interconnect into different cabinets. Sure. So if I'm going from cabinet A to cabinet B in the same data center, I'd be charged transit fees. So that's how business models were previously. Then what actually happened, funny enough, was Teraco is born out of international investments. So Guy Wilner from Equinix, etc., where they decided that let's take the risk, and it was quite a risk from a capital point of view, to say, okay guys, it's about time Africa has a carrier-neutral, vendor-neutral facility available. And luckily for their perspective from shareholders, is obviously the timing was right, because all the undersea capacity was there, the landscape was now open due to LTIC's ruling, so they were able to actually fill up the data center. So I do hope that we do find some more. So as business development, it's always fun to have some competition. So I hope we do see some more neutral environments actually opening up, but we'll have to see what time tells.
Thank you. Which other markets are you looking at besides South Africa, if you're allowed to disclose that information at the moment?
that's fine. Not a problem. So we've got 3 facilities, just to give you an overview, is Joburg, Durban, Cape Town. Joburg being the bigger one, funny enough, even though it's in the kind of the middle, but it is the business hub. We currently are looking at Kenya. We did have a look at Nigeria, but due to power and infrastructure constraints, it didn't make sense to actually physically build a facility there. So I think the next probably key from an investor point of view would be Kenya.
Thank you, Michelle, for a very interesting presentation about the changing landscape, IT landscape and internet landscape in Africa.
Thank you.
Wish you luck and success.